Alright, good evening everyone. My name is Benjamin, and today we're kind of doing a post-mortem and a look ahead of the 2021 elections and what we've learned from those. So it's really the Virginia and the New Jersey governor's race, as well as their General Assembly races, and as well as some of the other elections that are going on. In short, the Republicans had a very good night, and progressives and progressive ideas had a very, very, very bad night. And this is, for governor. So, I did okay. I was 50-50 on the results last Tuesday, but I was maybe a bit too hesitant to change my prediction in Virginia because while I thought the polling was good and it was definitely a good sign for the Youngkin campaign, I was a little bit skeptical that the Republicans would be able to turn out enough voters to overcome Virginia's partisan lean. Effectively, what we saw was an R+9 environment. If by my reckoning, Virginia's a D+7 state. Youngkin wins by 2, R+9 environment. Obviously, I think in the actual midterms next year, it's going to not be that bad, but R+5 to R+7 is certainly possible. And that would be very bad news for the Democrats. Of course, there's also opportunity for it to get much worse for the Democrats. Especially as it looks like their Captain Biden civil war is going on. Are Marvel memes still a thing? Yeah, okay. But yeah, as the intra-party fighting within the Democrats just continues, I don't really think it's gonna go down well. So, what are some lessons we could take away from this? If you are, say, a campaign advisor, if you're a Republican, try to localize your election as much as possible, especially in governor's races, state house, General Assembly, state legislature, those sorts of elections. Localize the election as much as possible, because that's going to do more than trying to nationalize it. You're going to be a lot more successful. You're going to get a much bigger bang for your buck, and the more you turn out in person, the more you go door to door, the better a return on the investment you'll see. Right? So, yeah. Just look at the Republican in New Jersey who unseated the state Senate president despite spending, I think it was like $5,000 for a general election campaign and $150 in the primary, 60 of which was donuts for his campaign staff. I mean, the more you focus on local issues, the better you'll do. If you are a candidate for governor, if you are a candidate for state legislature, focus on the issues that are dear to the voters of that region, okay? Doesn't hurt if, let's say, the national environment of people just hating Joe Biden continues. It doesn't hurt to throw out a "Let's Go Brandon" or something like that if you're a Republican. It'll fire up your base and it'll make sure that they know that you are aware of the national environment as well, which is always a good thing. Now, if you're a Democrat, what can you do? Well, Donald Trump isn't there anymore. He's not a daily presence. He's not in the White House. He's not getting daily news coverage unless you're even if you're watching very left-wing biased news networks. He's still not getting daily coverage. His tweets don't exist anymore. He's not posting on Facebook, so they're not constantly getting coverage. They're not being shoved in our faces every day. Donald Trump is not something you can win a campaign on by saying, my opponent supports Donald Trump. My opponent is in the same party as Donald Trump. Vote for me. That is not a winning strategy. And actually, this goes for candidates of both parties. Don't mention Donald Trump. I know it sounds ridiculous to say, but especially if you are a Republican in more Trumpy parts of the country, don't invoke his name, because guess what? That's inviting negative coverage. We just saw in Virginia the Republicans can absolutely do well in their old stomping grounds and maybe even expand into new, more suburban, more diverse areas like New Jersey, like, say, a Delaware potentially, or Connecticut, or Rhode Island. The Philly suburbs. You could expand that into maybe the Washington, D.C. suburbs on the Maryland side. It's going to be less impactful there simply because of how urbanized that state is. But the point remains, we're talking about the Republicans being able to advance in the suburbs by just not talking about Donald Trump, by distancing themselves from Donald Trump and talking about issues like education, focusing on the core of education, which is reading, writing, and arithmetic, rather, and boosting school performance by putting an emphasis on excellence and merit, rather than focusing on cultural issues, rather than focusing on, teaching some sort of progressive, as they would call it, woke ideology or critical race theory or something like that, where you're teaching people to separate themselves into certain subgroups, some of which are disadvantaged naturally by the system, and they are disadvantaged because of the existence of a privileged, straight white class. And yes, that absolutely is being taught. Yes, it absolutely does exist. And if it doesn't exist, why would you be opposed to it being removed from the classroom? And if you want to say, well, it's because I support free speech. The problem is, it also isn't supporting free speech, that idea, because people who oppose it, say, in school board meetings, are being thrown out of the room. They're having their speaking time cut short. And if you oppose it in the classroom, if you're a student, good Lord, you're going to get laughed at by your teacher and your fellow classmates. And of course, don't make gaffes. I mean, and this goes for both sides, by the way. Republicans and Democrats, be careful what you say. Because it absolutely, you have the right to remain silent. Anything that you say can and will be used against you, right? Because Terry McAuliffe made tons of mistakes in this campaign. From not shutting up about Donald Trump when he was running against Glenn Youngkin, to the debate gaffe, where one of many debate gaffes, but the one that mattered the most was looking at Youngkin and basically saying, you know what, I don't think parents have a right to be involved in their kids' education. It may not have been verbatim what he said, but that was what he said, and then he tried to play that off as if it was taken out of context. It wasn't taken out of context. There was no context for it to be taken out of, is the thing, because it was debate. The moderator looks at, asks them both the question: should parents be involved in their kids' education? And McAuliffe said no. It didn't even elaborate on the answer. And he tried to make it something about where he said, well, the context was I wanted to say that parents shouldn't be going into classrooms and banning books. And that's not even what this whole school board thing is about. It's about making sure that the material is appropriate, the material is educational, and the material is going to set children up to succeed in the world by teaching them the skills necessary to survive in the workplace. And don't get me wrong, there are great books out there that definitely show the horrors of, say, Jim Crow era. To Kill a Mockingbird is a prime example. Of course, Democrats want that banned because I don't know, actually. Great book, though. Truly a great book. Highly recommend it. And of course, the Democrats, who wanted to show a book that was extremely critical of slavery, that was, well, slightly controversial for some of the material that was in it. Now, for an advanced placement English class, I would not be unopposed to a book like that being included. Is it a bit graphic? Yeah, absolutely. Is it dark? Yeah, absolutely. But it definitely goes into the horrors of slavery. And unfortunately, there's more truth to some of that than I think some people are willing to admit. That said, I think because of some of the graphic material that's included in the novel, parents should be, told about it and should have to sign off and say, listen, I don't think my kid should be exposed to these types of passages. Obviously, maybe send a copy of those passages to parents to let them read it. Because guess what? At the end of the day, parents do actually have a right to know what their kids are being taught. So, anyway, let's assume that we have, say, a D plus or an R plus 5 to R plus 7 environment, which is a perfectly reasonable environment. So for the House elections, I'm going to say, I'm just going to ballpark it, and I'm going to give a very wide range right now. You could see a Republican gain of about 20 seats minimum, and I would put the maximum right now at 65. There's plenty of wiggle room. I think an average year they would probably gain about 35 to 40 with with an R plus 5 to R plus 7 advantage. In an R plus 5 to R plus 7 environment, 35 to 40 would be an average within that 20 to 65 range. But I could see any outcome within there is within about 80% confidence. So, and I think that's a reasonable starting point. Now, for the governor's elections coming up, I believe Charlie Baker is eligible to run again in Massachusetts. If he does, I expect him to win. Phil Scott, probably going to win. We just learned yesterday that Sununu is going to run for re-election in New Hampshire. That's pretty much safe. Maine is a pretty unique and weird state for right now. While I had this as likely for the Democrats to be reelected, I'm going to put that into the tilt column. I actually am making a flip from a leans Democrat to a tilt red, from a likely Democrat to a leans Democrat in Connecticut and Rhode Island, respectively. New York, I expect to be pretty safe. That's not even up for debate, honestly. California, that's pretty safe. Pretty obvious. Hawaii, pretty safe. I'm not going to question that. I'm putting Oregon initially in the likely Democratic column. Illinois, I'm actually putting in the leans Democratic column. Nah, I'm likely. Minnesota, I'm actually going to tilt for the Democrats. And any others. I'm leaning New Mexico to the Democrats. And for right now, Maryland is likely. And this is where things start getting really bad for the Democrats. Alaska is, I'm putting it as likely just because of their weird runoff rules now, and their ranked choice voting stuff. Idaho, that's pretty safe. Wyoming, pretty safe. South Dakota should be pretty safe. Nebraska, pretty safe. Oklahoma, pretty safe. Arkansas, pretty safe. Tennessee, Alabama, safe. I'm really confident about South Carolina for the GOP. Ohio, I had this as likely. I'm putting this in safe Republican territory at this point. I am that confident about it. Kansas, I am leaning this. Iowa, I'm leaning. And now we start getting into more competitive races. Actually, Colorado, I'm putting as safe as well, just because I think Colorado is slightly different than some of the rest of the states. Arizona should probably be a lean to the GOP right now, but I could see it going both ways. Full stop there. Nevada, I think it's just too inelastic. I'm going to tilt it towards the Democrats. Again, I could really see it going the other way. Georgia, at the moment, I am going to put this as a tilt towards the GOP. Just depends on whether or not, well, it just depends on a lot of things. Wisconsin, I am confident enough to say that the GOP is going to flip it. Michigan, it's a tough one. Whitmer is not the most popular incumbent, but I'm not sure if the GOP has good candidates to run in Michigan, who are able to win over Detroit suburbs, as well as drive rural turnout. So we'll see. Pennsylvania, as it stands, I actually think the GOP can win that one, so I'm going to tilt that towards them. Florida should be pretty likely. I'm confident DeSantis can win. And another big thing that we learned yesterday is that the Republicans now outnumber Democrats. Registered Republicans outnumber registered Democrats in Florida for the first time in Florida's history. And Texas. I'm going to be honest, Greg Abbott can run for re-election. I don't really see any big hurdles for him there. Beto O'Rourke is not really a great candidate. And as we've seen, the Hispanic vote in the Rio Grande Valley is trending towards the right, and it's continuing to do so. A lot of special elections down in the Rio Grande, as well as a few heavily Hispanic state house seats either flipped or came damn close to flipping to the GOP. One last Tuesday was a San Antonio district that I flipped for the GOP. I know a mayoral seat in the Rio Grande Valley that was in a city that was 70% Hispanic, flipped as well. So, yeah. This is kind of where I expect the governor's races to go. So, yeah. Now on to the Senate, and let's get the obvious ones out of the way that we don't really... that I'm literally just putting these in safe because I am that confident about them. Right now, I'm going to do that for Alaska because even though I'm almost certain that a Republican will win, I think it's a good idea to be, reasonably conservative. Illinois is interesting. I'm going to put it as safe even though I think the margin is going to be within 15. Colorado could be competitive, but I'm going to put it in the likely category because I don't really see enough. I am absolutely saying that I'm actually downgrading Connecticut to a lean. I really do think it could be competitive. Sununu in New Hampshire really hurts the Republicans in the Senate. This one's weirdly flipping back to the Democrats, but it would have been a downgrade if there were no Sununu rumors. So, yeah. Because if Sununu wasn't even speculated to run for the Senate, it would have been a situation of... I probably would have had it as leans Democrat. I'm downgrading it to tilt. And that's pretty much that. The rest of the news is pretty bad for the Democrats. Laxalt is actually a really good candidate for Nevada, and I think he could genuinely win the state. And given that the GOP is going to have some momentum, we're going to go ahead and give him Nevada. To tilt, so I'm very cautious about this one. I really could see Cortez Masto winning there. Mark Kelly is an interesting one. He's definitely further to the left than his counterpart Kyrsten Sinema, and that could hurt him, especially in a Republican favorable environment. But the Arizona Republican Party is kind of self-immolating. So it's going to be a case of do Arizonan voters want to see someone who is currently voting 100% with the Biden administration and has no sense of splitting, or do they want someone else? The problem is their options are still not fantastic. But given the environment, I really could see Arizona flipping back to the GOP. Iowa, I think that's pretty likely given that Grassley intends to run. Florida, Marco Rubio, I don't really have any doubts that he can win that race. Tim Ryan is running, but I don't think he's going to be capable. I'm actually upgrading this to safe GOP for right now. Then we get to the big four. Georgia, North Carolina, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania, open seat. Wisconsin, don't know if it's an open seat yet. North Carolina, open seat. North Carolina, I think it's just not inelastic enough, and I think the momentum is going to favor the GOP. I've had this as tilt Republican. I'm actually upgrading it to leans Republican just because I think the environment's going to favor the Republicans a bit more. Georgia, I'm going to say that's another flip. I'm really bullish on Herschel Walker, and I think polls are indicating that you should be too. And given the environment, that's really going to help as well. So I'm leaning this towards Herschel Walker. I was tilting it towards him before. Wisconsin, I think that Ron Johnson can absolutely win this. And I think that if he declines to run again, I think the Republicans have an easier time holding it. So I'm actually leaning this towards the GOP right now. And moving over to Pennsylvania, while the Republicans don't really have a true star candidate in Pennsylvania, the momentum is going to be what's going to carry them over the edge here, especially as Pennsylvania is basically dead even on partisanship. We saw the Republicans win a few statewide races there for court offices, so for judgeships. And I don't think the Democratic candidates are all that inspiring. You've got Fetterman, who is kind of a progressive but has a lot of baggage that the Republicans are absolutely going to attack. You have Connor Lamb, who is, well, the definition of a white bread Democrat. I mean, he is as interesting as white bread, is what I mean by that. And I don't see him being able to motivate people to come out to vote. So, yeah, I'm also upgrading this to leans GOP. This is certainly not, a final prediction or how things will absolutely go. The Republicans could absolutely lose any of these, competitive seats, and the Democrats could lose their competitive seats. Connecticut, I'd pump the brakes on just a touch with that take. I'm just putting it there because I do sense that there could be an opening for the GOP there, especially as they're going to be playing offense anyway. So early on, it helps to be playing offense in as many places as possible. So that includes Colorado, Illinois. That includes Connecticut. I think there's vulnerability potentially in Oregon. Those are places that if you're a Republican Party, you need to be, putting a few feelers out to see, hey, could this race actually be competitive? But then as things narrow on, you need to focus where you are actually making those inroads. So your New Hampshires, Wisconsin's, Pennsylvania's, North Carolina's, Georgia's, Arizona's, Nevada's. Did I say Wisconsin? Wisconsin, of course. And if you actually have been getting some dividends consistently in one of those places you put out early feelers, go ahead and spend more money there because clearly it's working. But if it's not, then it's time to back out and say, we'll do nominal support, the minimum required. We've got other races that need our immediate focus. Anyway, that's going to end it for today. I hope you all enjoyed. I'll see y'all next time. Remember, likes, comments, subscriptions, they always do help. I greatly appreciate them. I would love to reach 1,000 subscribers by the end of the year, and we're less than 100 away, so we can absolutely do this. And remember, I set out 1,000 as the goal for the year, but I didn't expect it to happen. So, let's do this. Come on, y'all. Thank you very much. Have a nice day.